Vice President J.D. Vance, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Welcome to my home. It's good to have you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and we really appreciate the time with
Of course.
you. We have a lot of topics to get to, but I do want to start with some breaking news. We've learned that the FBI is searching the home of former Ambassador John Bolton, his office as well.
Sure.
Can you tell me, why is the FBI raiding Ambassador Bolton's home and office, and did the White House get a heads up?
Well, so we're in the very early stages of an ongoing investigation into John Bolton. I will say we're going to let that investigation proceed. What I can tell you is that unlike the Biden DOJ and the Biden FBI, our law enforcement agencies are going to be driven by law and not by politics. And so if we think that Ambassador Bolton has committed a crime, of course, eventually prosecutions will come. But as you know, Kristen, this is all part of gathering evidence, trying to understand something that we're worried about. And of course, I'll let the FBI comment on the next stage of the investigation.
What's at the root of this? Is this about classified documents?
Well, again, I'll let the FBI speak to that. Classified documents are certainly part of it, but I think that there's a broad concern about Ambassador Bolton. They're going to look into it. And like I said, if there's no crime here, we're not going to prosecute it. If there is a crime here, of course, Ambassador Bolton will get his day in court. That's how it should be. But again, our focus here is on, did he break the law? Did he commit crimes against the American people? If so, then he deserves to be prosecuted. As
we have this conversation, has Ambassador Bolton been detained, taken into custody, arrested in any form?
So this news just broke this morning, and the FBI, I haven't talked to the FBI this morning. I don't know the answer to that question. I assume that he hasn't been detained and won't be detained until there's an actual prosecution, if that actually happens.
As you know, Ambassador Bolton is a frequent critic
Sure.
of President Trump's. He's also on Kash Patel's enemies list. The administration has already revoked his security clearance, Secret Service protection. Is Ambassador Bolton being targeted because he's a critic of President Trump?
No, not at all. And in fact, if we were trying to do that, we would just throw out prosecutions willy-nilly like the Biden administration DOJ did, prosecutions that later got thrown out in court. If we bring a case, and of course we haven't done that yet, the Department of Justice has not done that yet, we are investigating Ambassador Bolton, but if they ultimately bring a case, it will be because they determine that he has broken the law. We're going to be careful about that. We're going to be deliberate about that because we don't think that we should throw people, even if they disagree with us politically, maybe especially if they disagree with us politically. You shouldn't throw people willy-nilly in prison. You should let the law drive these determinations, and that's what we're doing.
But you know, a lot of people have already looked at this and said, this looks a lot like retribution. Is this retribution?
Well, who has said it looks a lot like retribution, Kristen? A lot of people who tried to throw Donald Trump in prison for completely fake charges that were later thrown out by multiple different courts. I suspect that if the media and the American people let this case actually unfold, if they let the investigation unfold as it's currently doing, they're going to find out that what we're doing is being very deliberate and being very driven by the national interest and by the law here, and that's as it should be.
Let's turn to the war in Ukraine.
Sure.
I had the opportunity to speak with the Russian foreign minister.
I heard.
Yes, he says, as of right now, there's no meeting planned between President Putin and President Zelensky. And he added, there needs to be an agenda first, saying, quote, this agenda is not ready at all. Are the Russians stringing President Trump along?
No, not at all, Kristen. I think the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict. They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith. We are trying to negotiate as much as we can with both the Russians and the Ukrainians to find a middle ground to stop the killing. I think what the president has tried to do here is try to engage in very aggressive, very energetic diplomacy because this war is not in anyone's interest. It's not in Europe or the United States' interest. We don't think it's in Russia or Ukraine's interest to keep going. So we're going to keep on pushing for a diplomatic solution. And one final point about this, Kristen, if you look historically, whenever you have a complicated war with a lot of death and destruction, it kind of goes in fits and starts. There are hills and valleys to the negotiation. We sometimes feel like we've made great progress with the Russians, and sometimes, as the president has said, he's been very frustrated with the Russians. And we're going to keep on doing what we have to do to bring this thing to a close. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think that we're going to continue to make progress, but ultimately, whether the killing stops, that determination is going to belong to whether the Russians and the Ukrainians can actually find some middle ground here.
Well, you talk about concessions, and yet the Russians rejected the ceasefire proposal that President Trump put forward. There's no meeting plan between President Putin and President Zelensky. And this week, Russia targeted an American factory in Ukraine. There were 600 people inside at the time. No one was killed. What makes you think President Putin is serious about peace?
Well, I didn't say they conceded on everything, but what they have conceded is the recognition that Ukraine will have territorial integrity after the war. They've recognized that they're not going to be able to install a puppet regime in Kiev. That was, of course, a major demand at the beginning. And importantly, they've acknowledged that there is going to be some security guarantee to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Again, have they made every concession? Of course they haven't. Should they have started the war? Of course they haven't. But we're making progress, Kristen. And what I admire about the president in this moment is he's not asking 3.5 years ago. He's not, trying to focus on every nitpicky detail of how this thing started 3.5 years ago. He's trying to focus on the nitpicky details of now, of what do the parties disagree on, what do they agree on, and how do you build a foundation from one side of that ledger to the other so that you can stop the killing.
But was President Trump, were you enraged when you learned that Russia targeted an American company based in Ukraine?
I don't
was
like
that not
it,
a slap
Kristen.
in the face
I
to the
don't.
peace
I don't
process?
like it, Kristen. But this is a war, and this is why we want to stop the killing. The Russians have done a lot of things that we don't like. A lot of civilians have died. We've condemned that stuff from the get-go. And frankly, President Trump has done more to apply pressure and to apply economic leverage to the Russians, certainly than Joe Biden did for 3.5 years when he did nothing but talk, but do nothing to bring the killing to a stop. So you ask me what I'm enraged by. What I'm enraged by is the continuation of the war. What I'm enraged by is a presidency and Joe Biden who for 3 years did nothing to end the killing. What I'm actually excited about right now is that we have a president who's engaging in energetic diplomacy to try to stop the killing. That's as it should be. I think the American people should be proud of it. And whatever the outcome of this, whether the war ends in 3 months or 6 months or hopefully not beyond, but maybe, we should be proud that we have a president who's trying to stop the killing. He's done it, by the way, 6 wars that the president has brought to a close all over the world. This would be the 7th. It's the most complicated.